Hey, what's going on, guys? Today we are checking out Bandai's new RX-78-2 Gundam revival version, and I say new in the fact that it is a new release. Obviously, though, the style of this one is in the style of the old kits from the early 80s. This is a really cool concept where we have a new kit, with all of Bandai's latest technology, but it's in the style, the outward as appearance, the aesthetic of those old style kits. Really interesting idea, and I'm looking forward to checking this kit out. It's in a cute little tiny little box. Let's go ahead and check it out here for today's video. So right here on the front of the box, you got that retro style box art with a little bit of twist. It does feature the Amuro illustration there, classic, but it's got some of these armor panels separated, and it's letting you know that it includes separate colored parts that don't need to be painted. And it also says that no nippers or adhesive are needed, as well as the design of the parts does not show the mating seam from the front. So basically that means we don't need nippers, so it's going to be using touch gates. We can expect a high level of color separation, sort of similar to like the entry grade, and there's not going to be any seam lines from the front, it says, so that means we may have some seam lines on the sides possibly, but really cool design here. Also features the Gundam 45th anniversary logo right there, so pretty cool. On the ends of the box here we got the MS Normal Type 144 scale RX-78-2 Mobile Suit Gundam here. Love the retro designing here on the side as well. This is the revival version. Then over here on this side of the box, it shows the unchanged form and solid evolution here of the Gundam. So we've got all of our text and everything in this is going to be in Japanese and in English, which is nice. We've got an expanded view of the model kit and a look at the runners there. Looks like it's just going to be just the two runners, one white and one multicolored runner there. Here's the old kit and the revival version. So yeah, they really retained the overall shape like perfectly there and just made it, nice, new, fully colored and separated and everything. So that's awesome. Here on the other side, we got to look at action poses. Well, it is going to be improved in terms of the construction, not enough to really give it too much more articulation, it looks like, but we'll find out here in just a moment. As we're ready to pop the box and see what we've got inside here, I'm expecting maybe some more kind of interesting little tidbits inside in the manual, maybe kind of more callbacks to the original. And yeah, this is certainly one where in some of the really old kits, if you guys have ever built them, the parts list here, which is like showing just the runners that are included, also kind of doubles as your color guide, as in like the old kits. Now these runners are actually in these colors, but in the old kits, the runners would just be in one color. But here on the parts list, it would show you everything like in the correct color that it's supposed to be in a lot of the old kits, if I remember correctly. But so that's kind of cool. Callback here, we have some more images of what the kit's gonna look like there. On the other side, just your basic assembly instructions, how to snap the parts off the runner and assemble them. And then down here, a cool little part about Ito-pla. Ito just meaning color in Japanese, so color de plamo. So it says, advances in technology have made multicolor molding possible. The colors of the Gundam that couldn't be created back in the day can now be recreated. So yeah, very cool. Opening it up here to the inside, we're gonna have the assembly, which of course is still gonna be quite simple here for this one, but they've kind of helped to fill in this part of the instructions by adding some more down here. Just kind of some more bits about like the history and development of the model making process and everything. So here's the haikus of reminiscence there. That's pretty cool. Some more cool bits here about the Vulcan guns protrude from within. Very nice. And then I guess about this broken part here, another haiku of reminiscence. It's even going to continue on to the inside where the construction all switches to just black and white here. No more color, but we still have some interesting stuff down here at the bottom. Instead of seam lines through everything, we now have no seam lines there on the front, it says anyway. We've got that, and then about the seam lines there on the leg as well, about kind of all the skills that you would need to get rid of all that. There's some really cool stuff here in the manual for sure. QR codes there to the Bandai hobby site, of course. Finishing up the construction, and I think we saw everything there in the manual. Let's check out the runners. And it is actually going to be 4 runners, sort of technically, although it's basically 2 runners that are just kind of snapped in half here. I wonder if we might see like a bagged version of this at some point in the future, maybe sort of similar to like the entry grades. But here on runner A1, you can see we've got some yellow, red, and gray parts for the hands, backpack, and beam rifle, the shield parts there. Runner A2 also has a little gray part up there, red, yellow, and blue here for the body and the head, everywhere where we've got color there. I love how the feet too, the feet parts here are just molded in a single part there, and they left the flat bottom of the feet. Whereas B1 and B2 here are going to be all of our white parts, and as you would expect, they're not in a pure white, but in that sort of slightly greenish tinted white there, classic for these older kits. And that's going to be all of our parts there, including our beam saber, which is just going to be a solid piece there as well for us. It all looks pretty interesting. Let's go ahead and get this put together and check it out. But okay guys, and here is our adorable little Gundam all built up, and it was a really quick build. I mean, it goes together very similar to like a entry grade kit, but almost even like simpler than that, which kind of makes sense for the design. Of course, I think it fits that, but a really interesting build. I think it comes out looking really nice. I mean, obviously that's just going to be a little bit subjective and based on your opinion of this very retro design of the Gundam, but obviously it's going to look a lot better than the original kit being in that solid like minty white. Now with it at least being all like fully colored, it looks really good. And if nothing else, I think it makes for just a nice little display piece to have on your desk or something like that, even if you don't want to do anything more additional with this. And it's also a really cheap kit too. So just as a sort of like collector's item sort of thing, it's definitely one that I can highly recommend you guys pick up for yourselves. But let's take a little bit closer look at it, starting off here with the accessories. So as for our accessories, as you may have seen just a moment ago, we did have the beam rifle there. The beam rifle is just going to be one piece. So the good news is that it's not going to have any seam lines on it. It will have a mold line kind of going all the way around. It is going to be certainly lacking in some detail, like for the camera there, it's just flat. It doesn't have an actual hole for the barrel. These are a couple things that I will show you guys how you can possibly modify. So make sure to stay tuned to the end of the video for a little tip on how to add a little bit of detail here to our beam rifle. But obviously nothing moves or anything here on this. It's just kind of as is. And obviously, as you can see from the hands there, it's going to be in the retro style hands with just like a big boulder with a hole in it. And these are two pieces, so you will have a seam line down the middle of the hands there. So that should be pretty easy to get rid of though if you want. That'll just fit into the hand then like that. And then for other weaponry, of course, we have the beam sabers. Now these beam saber handles in the backpack don't actually come out because that's actually one piece that kind of goes through the backpack here. So if you wanted to make it look like, you know, if you want to have one beam saber in the hand, then it shouldn't be here in the backpack. You can just cut that piece and just omit that if that's how you want to display the kit. So as for what can be held in the hand, here is our beam saber with the effect part. Obviously just this is all molded as one piece, so this is something that you can mask and paint pretty easily. I'll give you a little tip on how you can paint this here as well in just a moment. But while this is not to the typical size and or shape of what we're used to for beam saber effect parts these days, I think the size and shape does fit the design of this Gundam pretty well, just you know, once it's actually colored in the correct color. So that actually does fit the design pretty well, I think. That said, we do also have an additional beam saber handle here which has a hole in it. The manual doesn't exactly say this straight out, it just says use it as you like. But obviously one thing that you can do if you have a leftover beam saber effect from a different kit is you can plug your 1/44 scale beam saber effect part into this handle here, and you can have one with an actual beam effect. Now if you have one of these shorter type beam saber effects, I'm sure I have one around here somewhere, that would probably look a lot better. In 1/44 scale you have like the full size long size ones here like this, and there's a shorter size one which would be good, but this long one is certainly very long. It's going to look incredibly long here on our Gundam. But if you wanted to like heat and bend this to make it look like a kind of slashing effect, that could look pretty cool for sure. So of course it's nice to have that as an option. And then lastly, of course, we've got our shield here. Now this is nice that it's all color separated and everything. The hole up here at the top is not an actual cutout, but you could pretty easily cut that out as well. Maybe we'll, while we're here giving tips, I'll give you a tip about how you can do that pretty easily as well here in just a minute. Just a couple of pieces. You do have a separate piece here for the handle that's just going to fit into our hole in hand, and a little bit of detail here on the backside, which is pretty good. I feel like the original kit, I'm not sure, but I have a feeling probably didn't have this much detail on the back, but I guess it maybe did, since this is supposed to be just like a colored reproduction for the most part. So maybe it did, and that looks pretty good though. Certainly going to benefit from a nice decal here on the front of the shield as well, and you can see when it's reflected in the light, you are going to see like that line down the middle there is a little bit of a sink. So as always, just a reminder, especially on like large flat surfaces like this, if you're planning on painting it, make sure that you sand this here really good so that once it's painted, you can't still see that sink line in there. So that's pretty much it. This will just fit into the hand there like that, as I said, and you can just keep it on the side, or just by rotating the handle, it'll rotate to the front. But speaking of rotation, let's talk a little bit about the articulation here of this guy. It is going to be pretty basic, and then as a side note too, you can see there are safety flags on the antennas here. We're going to want to cut those off and file those down as well, just to make the V-fin look a little bit nicer. And the head here is just attached via a peg, so there won't be any movement that you can do with the head as is, other than just rotating side to side, so you can't make it look up and down or kind of tilt the head or anything like that as you would if it was a ball joint. So that's going to be pretty straightforward there for our head movement. And then for the torso, there's no rotating this either, because this red part here for the torso is also what makes the red part there for part of the crotch. And so with the hip section and the torso section being combined parts inside there, there's not going to be any rotation or bend or anything here in the torso section. As for the shoulders, those aren't going to bend or anything. Basically all you can do, these are just going to be a simple ball and socket joint here like that. So you can't actually rotate the arm at all, kind of other than just a little bit there like that. You can just bring that up to about 90 degrees, and then the elbow is going to bend kind of not even 90 degrees, a little bit less like that. The hands actually are on ball joints, but you're only going to be able to get just a tiny little bit of movement out of those. None of the skirting sections move at all. This is just kind of one big solid diaper around the hips there. And that is going to limit our hip articulation. As you can see, the legs are attached via a peg, sort of, but not like kind of typically like onto the peg. It's more sort of up onto the peg, which is kind of an interesting connection. But that does make it so that it's easy to get on and off, because otherwise you would have to disassemble the kit to get this side skirt armor out of the way in order to like pop it on from the side. So being able to pop it in from the bottom is actually quite convenient there for disassembling and reassembling the kit if you need. And while we've got it off here, this thigh armor is actually like one piece, which is like the side and the front and back, and then there's the second piece is just this inner part right here. So you will see like a little bit of a seam kind of going around the edge of this thigh part right there. And yes, it's true that the front of the leg doesn't have any seam lines on it, but you will have a bit of a seam here on the back side. If you look closely here, between the left and right side of this like kind of calf muscle armor there, right there, you'll have a seam line down the middle of that, which will be slightly challenging, especially up here at the top with this kind of round molded detail right there. But it's certainly going to be much better than what you had to deal with the original kit. So the knee bend will give you kind of like with the elbow, like almost 90 degrees, not quite. And the foot as well, like with the hand, is on a ball joint, but it's going to give you a little bit of up and down movement here, not too bad. But side to side is going to be pretty limited, and that's going to be kind of about it. Up underneath the feet, we saw the part on the runner just completely flat there like that. And once it's actually back on the kit, as far as like forward and back movement, that's going to be about the extent of it. As far as you can bring the leg forward and back, side to side is going to be almost pretty much non-existent as far as like any side to side movement or spreading of the legs here for any kind of more dynamic pose. So you're definitely going to be limited when it comes to the posing. As far as a couple of other seam lines here, there will be one on like the top of the torso right there, but not really too much else where you might expect. Like on the shoulders are just a single piece. The upper arm, there's no seam. The forearm, there's no seam. There is a bit of a mold line there. You can sand that out. And even up here on the head, we're not going to have any seam line there, except for maybe like a little bit at the top for like the mohawk camera part up there. There's a seam in the middle of that, but like the side of the head, that's all just like one solid piece there for like the helmet mostly. And then the color separation of the face parts is really nice, with the Vulcans even being a separate piece. That's like part of the yellow piece there for the eyes. So with all that color separation there in the head, it is going to be pretty nice and easy to paint. Or again, if you don't paint, it looks just great here, just straight out of the box. And so on that note, let's take a look at a couple poses here with the kit just as is, straight out of the box. Like I said, haven't done anything to this yet, but we will do a little bit of kind of tips and tricks here at the end of the video. That said, of course, this is the type of kit that you could go, like all in and do like a bunch of modifications on, maintaining the look of this kind of retro look, but improving points of articulation here and there if that's something you wanted to do. I'm actually somewhat slightly disappointed because I wish that Bandai would have done more to add more articulation to this kit while preserving, of course, the retro look and feel of the original kit, but kind of just making it slightly better articulated. I think that would have been pretty cool. Imagine like, a Gundam kit with this kind of aesthetic look and proportions, but being able to do some of the more like dynamic poses could be pretty cool. So something that would be definitely good for a kind of custom project to add more articulation to this guy. And I'm sure we'll be seeing plenty of projects like that. But yeah, I'm just really glad that Bandai made this kit, just because it is so different and unique, even though it's just like a reproduction of the original kit now just being made with more modern technology, and being able to make it all color separated and really nice looking, I think is pretty cool, while still maintaining so much of what made the original kit, you know, what it was in terms of just the overall design and everything. So like I said a moment ago, if nothing else, it just makes a nice kind of collector's item just to kind of have around on your shelf or your desk or in your display or whatever. And if you can get your hands on one of the old original kits from the 80s, it'd be cool to have the two of them side by side just to kind of show the difference between the two. And again, because this kit is so cheap, whatever your reasoning is, whether you want to just get it and build it and set it up on the shelf, or even not build it, just kind of display the box. It's got some cool box art on there too. Or I guess you could do both. Or if you want to like go in and customize and paint and do all that stuff, whatever the reason, I would highly recommend you guys to pick up one of these for yourself. It's a cheap kit and definitely a cool, just kind of commemorative Gunpla item, I feel like. So let's take a look at a couple of easy steps that we can do to improve the look of this guy. So for that beam saber handle, really simply, you could just use Gundam marker. So I don't have metallic pink, but I do have metallic red, and that's what I'm going to use here for this one. And you could just try coloring with the marker on there directly, although I would recommend masking here just to make sure that you don't get paint where you don't want it to. So I'm going to recommend using a little bit of masking tape here. Now this is kind of actually too wide, so what I'm going to actually do is just cut a strip of this. We got that thin strip there around the edge, and this fatter piece then I'm gonna kind of wrap just a little bit further back. I want it like good and close near where the paint's gonna go, and then this section just can kind of cover up everything else here. Test the marker, make sure you're getting good paint flow here. And there we go. So I often talk about how I don't really recommend Gundam markers, but as I've said before, they certainly do have their uses, and especially if you don't want to do anything else, anything more fancy with this, that's a perfectly good option. So we'll see how that looks in just a minute. We'll set that aside to dry while we take a look at a couple of other things. As for our beam rifle here, first of all, as far as just drilling a barrel hole, all you got to do for that is just take your drill set. It's pretty small, so I think probably just a 1mm drill is gonna do the job just right in there like that. And if you look really close, what I've done with my knife blade is actually just poke a really small little hole there right in the tip, close to the center as much as I can, without like kind of being even more precise about trying to measure that out. And then with our 1mm drill bit, just carefully, we're just gonna drill into here, and it doesn't need to be anything too deep either. We basically just want to make it look like it actually has a barrel in the hole here, a hole in the barrel, I should say. So once you've got that a little bit of a ways in there, it's looking pretty good. I'm just gonna also then just kind of sand the edge of this, because usually just from the drilling process, it makes a little bit of an edge there. And then the other thing we can do is use a little bit, a really little bit of Tamiya extra thin cement, just basically as a way to make our hole look good and clean again. If you're not going and actually painting the whole thing, it's a real easy way to just like make it look good and clean, doesn't look like it's like sanded and everything. So there we go, there's our rifle with an actual barrel there. Simple, but at least a small improvement to the overall look here. Now as for the camera bit, what I'm gonna use for this, first of all, I wanna try to mark the center point of this once again. And for this, I'm actually going to use the God Hand spin blade set. Now what these blades will do is make, instead of a drill, how it makes like a kind of conical hole, this will make a flat hole. So it's just got a flat end on the end of these blades. And I think the largest size that I have here is a 3mm. These just work in your kind of hand pin vise handle if you have one somewhat like this. And the end of this spin blade, although it's flat, it does have a tiny little point there, and that makes it good for kind of staying centered if you just mark your center point on where you want to use it. And then just like a drill, just gonna kind of drill carefully here, turn it carefully. And this is a pretty thin part. It's only maybe a couple millimeters deep there, so I don't want to go too deep with it. I just want to make a nice recessed detail here. So I'm going to spin that around a few times here, brush it off, take a look, see how it's looking. Without getting too scientific and actually measuring that, I think I actually nailed the center of that pretty well which is nice. So there we've got an actual round detail there. And if I would have had a 4mm blade, would have been good. I think if that's actually a little bit wider. 3mm looks okay, and definitely is more detailed than just a flat. So that looks pretty good. I think I might make it a little bit deeper, and then why don't we actually add a little detail part in there too. So we've got these detail parts here from Kotobukiya P101 of just some circle detail parts, and you can see right up here lets you know the size. So these are 2mm, 3mm, 4, and 5. I'm going to use the 3mm ones because those are going to match. I've got two different options here. I'm going to go ahead and use one of these right here. The options are like almost the same. You can see the line details, like one's like all the way through and one's just kind of like an inner line detail. It's just slightly different there. And then very carefully, really try my best not to drop this in the wrong spot. I'm going to try to get this in there and get it situated. There we go, something like that. I've gone for a horizontal position there for that. I think that looks pretty straight. And then again, just to make sure that that's not going to go anywhere, going to hit it with a little of the Tamiya extra thin cement here. There we go. Now our beam rifle has a little bit more detail here while still being not too much more that it looks like anything out of place. Another quick thing that I figure we can do while we're here is actually remove the flags off the V-fin. So this is something I've talked about many times, how to do this. My preferred technique is to start off with nippers, so just lop off kind of about half of this. You don't want to get too close to the actual V-fin because you don't want to actually cut off any more of that than you really want to, because pretty thin little part. Number one, it can break easily. Number two, it's harder to repair, sort of, as it were. Next step then, just kind of depending on what we have left here at the moment, I will try to shave it down a little bit with the knife, but again, just being very careful. Obviously, just being careful of cutting yourself for your health, but you also don't want to put too much pressure on the actual part. Again, it's a fairly delicate part here. You don't want to break it. So we're just trying to take a little bit off, and we're still not trying to go completely off, not trying to remove it entirely at this step. Just kind of whittle it a little bit there. And after that step, you can see we still got a little bit left on there. We're getting close though. It's looking better for sure. But for now, I'm going to do a little bit of filing just to get it real close. And then we're going to finish off with a sanding stick here. There we go. Looking much sharper. You could sharpen it, I mean, like real sharp to a point, and there's different ways to go about doing that. But for today, we're just gonna stick with just removing the safety flags, and definitely a little bit of an improvement there to the head. Lastly then, here for the shield, to make that an actual cutout detail, really simply all you gotta do is just cut it out. But the easier way before we start cutting is actually drilling. So you just drill a few holes here, and then you basically just kind of cut everything else out like that. The drilling will just kind of give you holes to start off with, and then you can kind of go from there. So I'm just going to put a few holes here in this. All right, there we go. So I made a few holes, and now I can use a hobby knife, and combination with a file as well will also be useful, and basically just kind of cut out the inside of here. The plastic's not too thick, so it shouldn't be too difficult. There we go. Looking pretty good. Again, not maybe perfect, but pretty good enough for our demonstration purposes here for today. And by now, our Gundam marker is dry enough, so I went ahead and took off that masking tape, and here's how that's looking. Again, definitely an improvement over just the plain white sticks, so not too bad overall. And so there we have it. Basically, with like 15 minutes of work, we got, I wouldn't say a much better looking model, but definitely a slightly improved looking model here overall. And this is obviously just a small sample of some of the improvements that you could make to this. There's so much more that you could do to have some fun with this kit, and I think I will work on this kit some more in the near future, so look out for that. But for now, guys, that's going to do it for this video. Hopefully you enjoyed taking a look at this kit as much as I enjoy this kit as well. And if you guys want to check out this kit for yourself, of course, you can check out the link in the video description to USA Gundam Store. It is currently in stock at the moment of recording this video, so you can pick it up there, while the Thanksgiving sale is actually still on, so check that out there on the website. But as always, guys, thank you so much for all of your support, leaving a like, making sure that you're subscribed. I really appreciate it. Thank you guys so much. Till next time, hope you all have a great day. See ya.